Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Horst Lüning. I'm the master taster of Whisky.com, and today we're here, my son Ben and Scott from the Tomatin distillery, and we're talking today about the Cu Bocan malts. And well, you know Scott already from our live stream, where he presented the core range of Tomatin, and today we're going to the peated ones. And the Cu Bocan, I think, is not that established. It's quite a new brand. And,
that's right.
Go ahead.
That's right. So, Tomatin, those of you that know it as a non-peated whiskey. But in 2013, we decided to enter the peated whiskey market for the first time, and that was with the Cu Bocan. At that time, the demand for peated whiskey was becoming higher, and we had some in casks. We'd actually been making peated whiskey since 2005. When we first made it, though, the intention was not to have a brand of peated single malt Scotch whisky. We produce a number of blended Scotches, such as the Antiquary, the Talisman, the Big T, and various other blended Scotch whisky brands. And in 2005, the cost of peated whisky was becoming higher and higher. A number of the distilleries that we were sourcing our peated whisky from started selling whisky as a brand, and so they could get more for a case of their brand than they could a tanker of their bulk whisky. So our distillery manager at the time was in his office looking at a spreadsheet with all the prices of whisky on it, and he was looking at his distillery outside, and very much a eureka moment where he came to the why don't we just do it ourselves sort of idea. And so for the last week before Christmas of 2005, we used a lightly peated barley, 15 ppm in the barley, to be precise. And ever since then, for the last week before Christmas, that's what we've done. We've used peated barley.
Sorry to interrupt you. Mm-hmm. You do this because once you have the peated whiskey into your system,
yep,
everything is contaminated with the peat.
Exactly.
And then after Christmas you have a cleaning period, or what are you doing?
That's exactly right. So after that week is done, it's interesting. You can walk around the site and you just smell the peat in the air. And this is a lightly peated whiskey, so I can only imagine what it's like in Islay, for example. But yeah, you walk around the distillery and it's a lot of this peat reek, as we would call it, the whole way through. Now we clean the distillery weekly, but for something like this you need a much deeper clean, and the distillery is shut down from before Christmas until early January, which gives us a perfect amount of time to properly clean all the equipment out, so that when we start producing non-peated barley again, it's not contaminated by the phenols.
So it's just a week, so the amount of Cu Bocan you're producing is quite low, because a lot of you need for the blends as well.
That being said, we can produce about 60,000 litres in a week, so it's still a good amount of whiskey, and it's actually quite interesting because originally, as I said, we produced 15 ppm, but more recently we've moved up to 35 ppm. Mm-hmm. The reason for that, it means that in a couple of years we can produce a heavily peated whiskey if we want to, but more so we can blend peated spirit with non-peated spirit, mm-hmm, and get the 15 ppm and get more of it than we can produce in that 1 week.
So what does the Cu Bocan stand for? Is there a Gaelic story behind it?
Yeah, so essentially what had happened was after we had produced this peated whiskey for blending, we had tried it a couple of times and realised this is interesting. Mm-hmm. And then we were doing some research about the area and the local area, and we had found this story about the last wolf in Scotland, and the last wolf was killed a couple of kilometres away from where the distillery now stands.
Okay, good point.
Back in 1742. So that's a long time ago. That's before the Battle of Culloden. And the Highlands of Scotland are quite a superstitious area. I mean, you hear all these fantastic stories of the Loch Ness Monster, for example, mm-hmm, and each village and town has its own legend or myth, and it just so happens that Cu Bocan is the local myth in Tomatin, which is idea that the ghost of this wolf comes back every couple of generations and haunts the local area. If you have a couple of whiskies and walk out late at night, you might see it. But it's a nice story that works well with that more mystical peated side of the whiskey.
Okay.
So the first one we're going to try is the standard Cu Bocan. The Cu Bocan in the black box is what we released in 2013.
So it's 46% ABV.
Yeah.
It's non-chill filtered.
That's right. So what we do here, this is a combination of 3 different types of casks. 50% is matured in ex-bourbon barrels, 30% is matured in sherry casks, and 20% is matured in fresh oak casks, virgin oak casks.
Okay.
So we've got 3 different types of maturation on the go there, and all married together to create this fantastic whiskey. Now, the idea of Cu Bocan is not to be the heavy peated whiskey. This is more of an introduction to peated whiskey. Anyone that's tried Tomatin, Legacy and 12-year-old know it as an easy drinking whiskey. This is an easy drinking peated whiskey.
Okay.
So when you say easy drinking peated whiskey, from what I've experienced now so far at Tomatin Distillery is definitely easy drinking with a lot of fruity, bit of a citric character. Does this continue, and do you see the distillery character developing there? Is this just a variation, or is this totally new?
It's almost like a mix between tradition and new, because you still get that citrusy, light tomatin flavour, but it does have more of an earthiness, just a general earthiness. On the nose here,
it took quite a while to let the smoke develop. So
very little smoke.
Yeah.
Very little smoke.
Yeah. So this is from the 15 ppm?
Yeah, 15 ppm. What I find here is that on the nose you get a lot of the bourbon flavours. Still that nice creamy vanilla.
So typically if you have such an Islay malt, it's overwhelming and you can't taste anything below that.
Yeah.
So, and this is, in the beginning you already have different notes of flavor than smoke.
So
the smoke comes on very slow. I get it now.
It's quite interesting. Someone was speaking to me about this, and they said it's almost like it's not a peaty character. It's just got a smoky taste. It's just like a lightly sherried mature whiskey isn't a sherried character, but it's got a lightly sherried taste to it. And even on the taste, at first, it's still much more cask orientated. There's much more of the flavour from the oak. For me, when you swallow this whiskey and you take that first breath, that's where the smoke is.
The typical question is, how old is this whiskey? So it's carries no age statement?
No age statement, but this is around about 8 years old. That will go up and down depending on the stocks that we have, what we've got in each cask. Ultimately, we're trying to get the same consistent flavour all the time, so that means tweaking the recipe a little bit. But generally speaking, it's an 8-year-old whiskey.
Okay. I'm typically no friend of those extreme, wonderful, of those extreme smoky whiskies.
Yeah.
They are too harsh for me. So above those 40 ppm, it's impossible for me to find that good.
Yeah.
And this one is, well, it shows more complexity. It's not the smoke covering all complexity.
Exactly.
But it still lets the whiskey through, and it was wonderful intense with the 46% and shows fruitiness and all those vanilla caramel notes from the ex-bourbon cask.
Definitely. It's actually quite interesting because, as we said in the live stream that we did recently, the Tomatin Distillery from the 1950s expanded. And as it expanded, we had to get rid of our own floor maltings on site, and we outsourced that. But before 1956, Tomatin was a lightly peated whiskey.
Okay.
That only changed as the demands of our blended customers wanted a non-peated whiskey. So this is probably a lot more in line of what we were doing in the 1940s and 1950s. It would have never have been a heavily peated whiskey, because if you go back and try some of the Islay whiskies from the 1950s and 1960s, they're not heavily peated. Smoke was almost seen as a flaw in whiskey.
Yes, because you heat it with the peat. It was cheaper. The labor was cheap.
Yeah.
Import of oil or coal was expensive.
Exactly.
And so therefore, yeah.
So this is probably more of a historically accurate peated whiskey than.
But this is really light.
Massively light. Yeah.
Massively light. Yes.
Citrus. It's wispy. That's a great word for the smoke. It's quite wispy.
It's not too covering your mouth.
No.
So there's still more to feel on your tongue. So those extremely peated whiskey, they cover your mouth and never let anything through afterwards.
Yeah.
So, and yeah.
I do get a bit of a citric note, little bit of a vanilla note. It's very, very light vanilla note, but as soon as you swallow, you get that light smoke of cloud, a bit of a sourness, a bit more of the lemon, and very light, easy drinking whiskey. Yeah, I think that's the. I had now 5 of them, 5 of Tomatin whiskey, so I would say that's a Tomatin style, easy, light. This one is missing the fruity character.
Yeah.
Bit substituted
by the earthiness. Yeah.
Substituted by earthiness. Yeah.
So it's quite interesting as well, because to an extent, Highland peat will produce different flavours from coastal peat, just because of the chemical makeup of what peat is. It's decomposed plant matter. So a plant that grows on Islay is going to be very different from the one that grows 300 plus metres up in the Highlands. And that's what I've always found with the Cu Bocans, is that the smoke is much more floral than it is medicinal or iodine. It's much
phenolic more and hospital style.
Yeah. This is much more heather. It's a little bit in the Highlands, when they're doing the hunting, they have to regenerate the grouseland, and to do that they have to light the heather on fire so that it regenerates, and it does have that sort of smokiness to it.
Yeah. So this, I'm sorry about this, but. Enough alcohol today.
Yes.
I think this is my 9th glass.
So this whiskey was from our stocks we still carry, and this one was there's dust on it. It's a little older. So this is a special bottling from Bourbon cask. It's lighter in color, and perhaps you.
I will do so. A little bit about what we're trying to do with Cu Bocan. At the moment, anyway, because we only produce it 1 week a year, it's not going to be possible to have a range of Cu Bocans all the time. So what we do here is we have the standard Cu Bocan, which is always available, and then every year we'll do limited releases. And the first series of limited releases we did came off the back of this. Our distillery manager, Graham, was in Canada doing a tasting of this, and he did a deconstructed tasting. So this is the 3 cask styles, and then he tasted the bourbon cask, the virgin oak, and the sherry cask. And we thought, what a great way to introduce people to the whiskey. So the bourbon edition that we have here is exactly what we use for the 50% bourbon matured in this.
Okay.
And then we also released a sherry edition and a virgin oak edition.
I had
as well.
them, yes, I think so. But I can't remember.
So this is a great way of getting to the what the DNA of this is.
There are small bottles available as well, I think.
Yeah, 20 CL bottles of this.
I had small ones,
yeah. And then as an extension of this as well, we've actually been lucky enough to do 2 older vintages of Cu Bocan. We only started producing the peated whiskey in 2005, but in 2014 we released a 1989. And what had happened there was a batch of peated barley was delivered to the distillery by accident. And the guys decided very much at the time, it will be blended anyway, let's just produce it, because the hassle of getting the barley collected and then changed meant that we would lose some production time. So we released that, only 1,000 and I think it was 1,030 bottles worldwide, 3 casks left. That went down tremendously well. So what we did after that was a 1988 non-peated tomatin that had been finished in Ardbeg sherry butts. So that gave us much more of that phenolic, medicinal style of peat. But get into this.
So, how much sherry influence is then in the standard ones? You said 50%.
So 50% is bourbon, 30% is sherry, and then 20% is virgin oak.
Okay. So now we're gonna feel the bourbon influence of it.
Well, what's quite interesting with this is that I've found you actually get more smoke out of this than you do the standard one.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is this the 31 that you...
No, this is still with the 15 ppm. The reason is that sherry casks and virgin oak casks are big flavour, and they actually mask the smoke a lot. Whereas the bourbon by itself allows that to shine through that a little bit more. So it's still the same ppm in the barley and the distillate. It's just the way the casks influenced it.
The age is also pretty much...
8 years old. So this is... If this wasn't put in here, it would have been in here. Yeah.
Okay, but is this younger than...
Same age. 8 years old. Yeah.
8 years old.
Yeah.
It's much lighter in the nose.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Much more of the fruity flavours.
Fruity, yeah.
Okay, I would have expected more of a bourbon
it's
style.
this pineapple and citrus from the tomatin.
Yeah. A little bit of toffee as well. That sort of develops.
I would say there's more distillery character in there.
Yeah.
The bourbon barrels are just...
More what you come to expect from tomatin.
The used barrels, they don't, as you said, they don't add that much flavor.
Exactly.
You have to put your nose deep in.
The first thing with that is the colour. It's a lot lighter than the standard one, and that's an indication of how well the cask has influenced the flavour as well. So, much fruitier.
For me, the bourbon is superior because it's so
Very nice.
fresh.
Yeah. There were only 6,000 bottles of this produced, so that was a couple of years ago. If you find one of these, pick it up, because I mean I've got one in my cupboard, but it's not going to be open for a long time.
I find it rather sweet. A bit of a caramel,
sweet and fruity.
It's a strange mixture of sweet and smoke that you don't normally get from Scotch whiskey. But I personally really enjoy it.
Yeah, the strange thing about it is usually you do have a smoky and a sweet sherry mixture, but this time you have more of a popcorn. This is In the smell, I don't get the bourbon taste, but on the mouth and the feel and the initial sweetness and how it flows down, you do feel the bourbon. Plus a whiff of smoke. I find the smoke in the taste is a bit less intense. The nose, you do smell it. It's definitely there, but in the taste, you do have a less.
It's almost a complete opposite in that this one has no smoke on the nose, but it's got it on the taste, and this one has it on the nose, but not so much on the taste. But again, what I think is incredible about Cu Bocan is we're talking about peated whiskey here, and we're talking about popcorn, and we're talking about it's a unique opportunity to get a lot of flavour rather than just a lot of smoke.
So now I know the reason why those some of the Highland distillers introduce, say, 7 to 10 ppm smoke. So to bring this ancient taste back again.
It's almost it's a slightly, I guess the word I would use is dustier. So it's a little bit more like when you walk into a dunnage warehouse. That sort of
evaporation,
damp feeling, bit of something.
It's more like a bottling from 40 years ago than it is from most bottlings today.
Good. So, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for being in our video and telling us all about the Cu Bocan. So, if you like this video, then please feel free to share it with your friends. Have a look at all the Tomatin videos and see you next time.